Coming up on a newscast, the Yoon administration holds its first state policy review meeting. The live event invited civil panelists to discuss mainly the economy, balanced regional development, and social reforms. The IAEA chief met with President Yoon and the nation's foreign minister to discuss various topics, including the North Korean nuclear issue and Japan's radioactive water discharge. Many cities across South Korea saw heavy snow with advisories issued for some parts. Officials urge people to refrain from driving or heading outdoors, with similar conditions expected throughout the week. Hello, it's good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. The Yoon administration hosted its first public meeting to review state policy. 100 panelists from civil society were invited to cover a wide range of topics from economy to social issues. Yoon starts us off.
이 국정 과제는 저희 정부의 국정 운영 규범입니다. 국민과의 약속이고요. 그리고 무엇보다 지난 1년 안팎으로 어려운 경제 위기에서 정말 고생하시고 함께 애써주신 국민 여러분께 깊이 감사드립니다.
This is how South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol opened his first state policy review meeting on Thursday, inviting 100 panelists from civil society to Yongbin-gwan at the Blue House. The session was to offer a glimpse of what the Yoon administration has in mind for the next 4.5 years. Perhaps the timing couldn't happen better, as President Yoon's approval ratings recently recovered from their lowest point to 40% at one point, which could give the administration a sense that this is the right time to build up some momentum. With all that in mind, Yoon focused on tackling economic hurdles amid low growth and high inflation. And to stabilize the housing market, the South Korean leader promised to lower taxes for people who own multiple homes, saying it'll ultimately lower the burden on renters.
국민들이 일견 생각할 때는 부자들에게 세금을 덜어주는 거 아니냐 하는 그런 오해를 하실 수 있지만 다주택자에 대한 이런 과세를 좀 경감을 해서 시장에서 우리 열악한 지위에 있는 임차인들이 좀 저가의 임차를 할 수 있도록.
Also addressed were strengthening the social safety net to prevent crimes targeting women and children, like stalking or sexual violence, a war on drugs, and bolstering support for the socially vulnerable.
We will positively review introducing the U.S.'s Jessica's law that prohibits malicious sex offenders from living near schools or nearby areas after their release from prison.
As noted earlier this week, the president heralded a revamp of the current health insurance system as well, blaming medical misappropriation and insurance free riding. He said he'll make sure to prevent waste and help those who are severely ill and set a fair system for other insurance policyholders. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
A key agenda focused on during the first state policy review was the drive for three major reforms, namely labor, education, and pensions. The president firmly believes these are most important changes for future generations. Shin Se-byuk shares with us his remarks.
In its first state policy review on Thursday, the Yoon Suk-yeol administration touched upon its three audacious reforms in labor, education, and pensions. The last session on social reforms was opened by the president of the Korea Development Institute, Cho Dong-chul, who said it is the responsibility of the older generation to address social problems, and the three major reforms are key tasks for the nation to give hope to young people. President Yoon Suk-yeol spoke of the need for those reforms, saying they are a must for future generations.
우리나라를 지속 가능하게 하기 위한, 지속 가능성을 위한 아주 필수이고 그리고 결국 미래 세대를 위한 것입니다. 그러니까 연금 개혁은 우리 미래 세대가 일할 의욕을 상실하지 않게 해야 된다는, 노동 개혁은 우리 미래 세대에게 자기 역량을 발휘할 수 있는 양질의 일자리를 지속적으로 공급을 해야 되기 때문에 해야 되는 것이고, 또 교육개혁은 우리 미래 세대가 그야말로 국제 경쟁력을 가질 수 있게 해야 된다는 그런 차원에서 이루어지는.
Of the three reforms, President Yoon especially stressed the importance of the labor sector, saying if labor issues are left unaddressed, it could pose a serious problem in both the political system and the economy. Currently, the Yoon administration is pushing to overhaul the country's overall labor system, including the 52-hour workweek. It seeks to implement a more flexible work week that reflects the characteristics of each industry and company. Also, part of the scheme are strengthening the performance-based pay system and setting up a safe and fair environment for workers. And for education reform, the Korean government is planning a more tailored education system and nurturing enough manpower in semiconductors, digital, and biohealth. The Yoon administration also pledged the government's fullest support for equal education. In particular, President Yoon linked education reform to revitalizing the local economy.
그런데 이제 그 핵심 중에 핵심으로 들어가면 결국은 교육 문제입니다. 기업은 사람을 따라가고 사람은 정주 환경을 따라가는데 그중에 제일 중요한 게 학교입니다. 결국은 이 지방 균형 발전의 핵심적인 문제가 교육 문제라고 하는 것을.
Lastly, the government is looking to revamp the national pension system that's expected to run low starting 20 years from now. As of now, it is widely expected that the Yoon administration will seek to raise the retirement age from the current 60 and also increase the entitlement age for national pension benefits from the current 62 to 65 by 2033. The government plans to collect more opinions from the public and work together with lawmakers before making a detailed scheme later next year. 신세벽, 아리랑 뉴스.
The National Assembly is approaching the final deadline to pass next year's budget. Rival parties are looking to strike a last-minute agreement over the corporation tax issue. This comes as Speaker Kim Jin-pyo suggested cutting corporate tax by 1 percentage point to 24%. A compromise between the People Power Party's push for 22% and the DP, which believes tax cuts would only benefit the super wealthy. The main opposition appears to find Kim's suggestion acceptable, but the PPP remains reserved, citing the need for further review and negotiations with the DP. President Yoon met with IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi and discussed a wide range of nuclear issues. According to the top office, Yoon expressed concern over North Korea's development of nuclear and missile programs and called on the IAEA to support the denuclearization of the regime. In response, Grossi vowed all-out efforts to stop Pyongyang's nuclear program and preserve international non-proliferation. Also discussed was Japan's planned release of wastewater from the Fukushima power plant. The South Korean leader asked the UN nuclear watchdog to monitor it in a scientific and objective manner. The two sides also exchanged opinions on establishing a security protection zone for the safety of the area near Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia plant. Foreign Minister Park Jin told Rafael Grossi that the government appreciates the agency's role in monitoring North Korea's nuclear program. He added that Seoul looks forward to continuing working together to completely denuclearize the regime. The top diplomat also stressed that South Korea firmly believes wastewater from the Fukushima plant should be disposed of in accordance with international standards. Grossi agreed that Seoul and the IAEA are collaborating on many key issues, pointing out that South Korean experts and institutions are actively taking part in inspecting Fukushima's wastewater, which Tokyo plans to release into the sea next year. Heavy snow blanketed most parts of the nation. The weather agency issued warnings. They've been lifted in most regions, but temperatures could drop even further and more snow is expected. Shin Yeon walks us through the necessary precautionary measures.
Just a day after officials had issued the strongest cold snap warning this winter, many parts of South Korea saw heavy snowfall, mainly the greater metropolitan area. That's why the Korea Meteorological Administration issued heavy snow warnings in Seoul, parts of Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces for this morning. Heavy snow warnings are given when analysts expect 5 centimeters of snow throughout the day. Up until 3 p.m., Seoul saw around 4 to 5 centimeters. Fortunately, the city was prepared as officials had estimated up to 8 centimeters. They had designated 8,000 personnel and 1,000 pieces of equipment to be used to clear the roads and make sure they don't ice over. They also extended operation hours for subways and buses to make sure people can get home from work safely. Normally, the rush hour timetable is from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., but to prevent any accidents, officials extended it from 5 to 8:30. The Education Ministry also asked local authorities and schools to consider calling it a snow day or adjusting school start time, especially since the KMA expected it to get even colder in the next few days. Despite thorough preparations made nationwide, there has been a list of unfortunate events. 7 cars crashed on an expressway in Gangwon-do province due to slippery roads. 2 people were taken to the hospital. The KMA has asked people to layer up and be aware of frostbite or hypothermia, as temperatures will drop even lower over the weekend. Sunday morning's low in Seoul is expected to drop to minus 13 degrees Celsius. 신윤, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve decided on more rate hikes, part of efforts to bring down inflation. This comes as the Fed chair acknowledged further tightening could rather hurt the American economy. Jung helps us look beyond the digits.
The U.S. Federal Reserve's anti-inflation campaign isn't over, even with a 7th consecutive rate hike. At the end of its final policy meeting of the year on Wednesday, the Federal Open Market Committee announced its relatively smaller back-to-back hike in the benchmark overnight interest rates of 0.5 percentage point. The Fed slowed the pace from the 75 basis point hikes in each of the previous 4 meetings, but Chairman Jerome Powell said they have more work to do in terms of price stability.
We continue to anticipate that ongoing increases will be appropriate in order to attain a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2% over time. In addition, we're continuing the process of significantly reducing the size of our balance sheet.
Under the decision, the short-term benchmark Fed funds rate now stands at between 4.25% and 4.5%. This is the highest level since December 2007, and the cumulative raise has been the most aggressive since the 1980s. Although Powell mentioned November's consumer price inflation, which eased more than expected, he questioned whether it'll continue to go down.
The inflation data received so far for October and November show a welcome reduction in the monthly pace of price increases. But it will take substantially more evidence to give confidence that inflation is on a sustained downward path.
The Federal Reserve projects at least an additional 75 basis points of raises in the benchmark interest rate by the end of 2023. U.S. stocks tumbled following the Fed's decision on Wednesday, with the S&P 500 falling 0.6% after 2 days of gains, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost around 0.4%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite also shed 0.8%. 엄지영, Arirang News.
The gap between the federal funds rate and the Bank of Korea's policy rate is the biggest since the year 2000. More pressure on the BOK to keep tightening to prevent a further weakening of the won. It must also consider the effects of higher rates on economic growth. Shin Ha-young provides a breakdown of the numbers.
The Fed's monetary tightening has widened the gap in key interest rates between South Korea and the U.S. to the largest in 22 years. At 1.25 percentage points, the last time the gap was this big was in the year 2000, and it stayed that way for 6 months. The Bank of Korea's next decision on rates is due January 13th, and it's under growing pressure to act decisively. Narrowing the gap is important because it's contributed to the dramatic weakening of the Korean won, which raises the cost of imports and adds to inflation. But one expert says the BOK could still decide next month to be less aggressive.
When it comes to monetary policy, the BOK has to consider not only the foreign exchange market but also the local economy. Considering the current economic conditions, I think the BOK is going to raise the rate by 25 basis points in January and slow down the pace of its rate hikes.
In terms of economic conditions, he pointed to the country's economic outlook for next year, which is projected to see a slowdown from this year. The BOK downgraded growth for next year to 1.7%, while the Asian Development Bank has downgraded to 1.5%. Meanwhile, South Korea's Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho said in Thursday's emergency macroeconomic meeting that the Fed's latest move was in line with market expectations. He added that because uncertainty is still high due to inflation and the slowing economy, the government is putting more efforts into stabilizing the market through continued monitoring and communication. The same day, the BOK also held a meeting to review the situation in the financial markets and take action if volatility increases. 신하영, Arirang News.
The pandemic spurred tremendous growth in South Korea's biotech industry. In half a decade, production jumped at an average annual rate of 20%, crossing $16 billion last year. Yoon zooms in on this phenomenon.
The COVID-19 pandemic forced rapid advancement in biotech industries, which led production growth in the South Korean biotech industry to surge more than a fifth in 2021 from a year earlier. According to data published by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy and the Korea Biotechnology Industry Organization on Thursday, production exceeded $16 billion for the first time in 2021. Production first surpassed the $7.7 billion mark in 2017, holding its growth trend to surpass $13 billion for 2020, then to more than $16.1 billion for 2021. The data also shows the biopharmaceutical sector accounts for the largest percent of the industry's total production at 27.8% in 2021, but the growth is down from the previous year when it was 28.6%. The proportion of the biomedical equipment sector also rose to 25.1% last year from 22.7% the previous year, mostly due to a surge in the vitro diagnostics market due to the pandemic. Over the past 5 years, the industry's production has been growing at an annual average of 19.9%, with the bio-industry's exports jumping 18% on year. Overseas shipments of biomedical equipment soared 39% in 2021 due to massive global demand for COVID testing kits. On bio-industry imports, the figure shot up to 96.2% on year as South Korea imported millions of vaccines to fight the pandemic. Yoon, Arirang News.
The Brass Ensemble, a musical group comprised of members with developmental disorders, performed here in Arirang Tower. With Christmas just around the corner, some festive songs made it into their set list. Kim Jong-sil was there to meet them.
You're listening to a performance by the Brass Ensemble. Aged 24 to 35, there's one member each to play the trumpet, the horn, the tuba, and drums. A special unit from the Heart to Heart Orchestra. What's unique about these musicians is that they all suffer from different levels of developmental disorders. But that hasn't stopped them from becoming musicians. Meet Jae-gyun. He's been playing the trumpet for 16 years since he was in elementary school.
I just liked the brilliant sound of the trumpet. When I heard it, it gave me energy. I want to become a musician who can move people with his performances.
When I asked about the secret to the ensemble's harmony, they said there's only one thing that matters: practice. Some even practice for up to 10 hours a day. As a group, they rehearse 2 or 3 times a week in the build-up to a show.
The members of the Brass Ensemble are rehearsing just behind me, and they've prepared many songs for the Christmas season.
The orchestra spokesperson said they perform regularly to change how society sees people with developmental disorders.
People with developmental disorders are not far away. They could be a member of our own family or neighbor. So it's important to know that they're not wrong, just different. I think if people can understand their individuality and personality, they can feel closer to people with disabilities.
The Orchestra Foundation said it will continue to support its members so that they can perform in various places and follow their dreams. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
From doodles coming to life to a heartwarming story narrated through shadows, Korean children's shows find creative ways to deliver important messages. Kim Hyun-sung has some recommendations for this end-of-year season.
Doodles come to life. At Doodle Pop, a wordless children's show created by the Korean art troupe Brush Theater.
재밌었고 너무 신났어요.
There are no lines and the story is delivered through body language, facial expressions, and gestures. So I find it more expressive than other performances.
With the drawings coming to life, it tickles the audience's imagination.
The show was such a hit that it traveled to around 60 cities worldwide. It's also been picked as a best show for children by The Guardian newspaper in the UK at the Edinburgh Festival. And next year it's set to perform at the New York Lincoln Center.
The Lincoln Center has very high standards for its performances, and famous artists have performed there. We're the first act from Korea to be invited there with a children's show, so I'm very proud.
To see more creative children's shows like this one, there's also the Winter Asatej Festival. It's an 11-day-long program packed with Korean shows and plays catering to young audiences.
Korean pieces have this warmth to them. They're more focused on looking into the human emotions rather than caring about the technical functions.
One of these heartwarming plays featured in Asatej includes The Old Dog, a shadow play. This piece has been selected as one of the best 7 performances of the year by the Korean Theatre Review. It's a story about an old dog embarking on a quest to find its owner, an old grandmother who one day went missing.
I wanted to express the love the old dog had for its owner through shadows. I found that the mystical and metaphorical aspects of shadows fit well with the story.
The piece is perfect for bringing the family together and warming the hearts of young audiences this cold winter season. Kim Hyun-seung, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, empty houses are becoming a problem in rural areas as the populations in these parts decline. Jeollanam-do province's Best Clean Village project aims to improve living conditions as well as communication between the residents. Jung Eun-ju has the full story.
A village at Dangkut, or Land's End, the southernmost area of the Korean peninsula in Haenam County, Jeollanam-do province, has been remodeled. Gardens and murals have been made and red robin trees are planted neatly at the village entrance. Of the village's 60 or so households, 19 are people who have returned to the village after living in the city. The remodeling work allowed the residents to communicate more openly and grow closer, as it's all part of the Best Clean Village project promoted by Jeollanam-do province. Residents have to come up with their own ideas and actively participate in the project.
Our residents have come this far through communication, unity, and cooperating during the Clean Village project.
Villages that are selected as Best Clean Village are provided with 9 million won over 3 years. Jeollanam-do province is also collecting opinions by visiting villages and holding discussions with local residents.
If you have anything to tell your governor, make a suggestion, or even just give me a telling off, I will spend an hour with the village residents to listen.
There are about 2,000 villages selected for the Best Clean Village project, all of which are essential in creating what's been dubbed the Clean Jeollanam-do Blue economy. A clean and beautiful environment is important in enhancing the significance and living conditions of any village. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Some lingering snowfall will continue for the remainder of the night. Central regions will see the most. The Seoul metropolitan area, Gangwon-do, and northern Chungcheongbuk-do province will see up to 10 centimeters. Parts of the south will see about 1 to 3 centimeters. With temperatures plummeting overnight, frost and ice will appear again on the roads. Arriving conditions will be extra difficult tomorrow in driving, so make sure to give yourself some extra time for the morning commute. And behind the snow clouds is a surge of frigid air mass that will start to settle in overnight. After the snow completely tapers off, expect cold wave conditions to take over nationwide. Tomorrow, Seoul will be ice cold at -10 degrees. Chungcheon will be colder at -13. As for the daily highs, Seoul will be at -2 degrees. Daejeon and Chungcheon 0. Busan will be warmer at 6 degrees Celsius. This weekend, frigid conditions will make a return for most regions. On Sunday, lows will plunge to -13 degrees. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.